The Galactic Council chamber was never silent. It was a place where empires clashed, not with weapons, but with words sharpened into blades. Delegates bellowed their grievances, shouted threats across the marble floors, and flung insults like missiles. To them, diplomacy was not peace, it was another battlefield. And in that chaos, Marcus Hale sat. He was the sole representative of Earth, a man with unremarkable features, hair graying early, eyes dark and unreadable. Where others shouted, he listened. Where others slammed fists against the table, he folded his hands quietly. Where others demanded tribute or territory, Marcus said nothing. To the alien empires, his silence was laughable. The human is mute. Again, one of the Zir warlords sneered during a heated session. His scaled hands slammed the desk, his tusks bared in mockery. Does Earth have no tongue? Or is it so insignificant that words are wasted on us? Laughter rippled across the chamber. Other delegates joined in, mocking the silent man from a fledgling world. Some whispered that humans were too fragile to matter, that they had been granted a seat on the council out of pity, not respect. Marcus did not reply. He only watched. For years, this continued. When alliances were forged and broken, when borders shifted like sand in the stars, when wars erupted and were extinguished, Marcus Hale never raised his voice. He remained the quiet shadow among roaring beasts, and so the council ignored him. But silence is not weakness. Silence is patience. The Zir Dominion had grown restless. Their fleets, vast and bloodthirsty, had conquered half a dozen worlds in a season. Their warlord, Cathor, hungered for more. He turned his gaze to Earth, the so-called Death World, and laughed. To him, it was nothing but an upstart colony, a child among giants. When the Dominion fleets crossed the Terran border, they sent no declaration. They came with fire. Cities burned on Europa, colonies screamed for help. Council members looked away. After all, Earth had no allies, no ancient fleets, no grand weapons. Humanity would be devoured, and none would mourn. In the council chamber, reports of burning worlds arrived one after another. Still, Marcus sat in silence. The Zir warlord mocked him openly. "Speak, human! Where is your thunder now? Do you beg for mercy? Do you plead for our kindness?" For the first time in years, Marcus Hale stood. The chamber hushed, more out of surprise than respect. The quiet man was finally speaking. His voice was calm, unhurried, each word deliberate, heavy as stone. "You have chosen war," he said, his eyes fixed on the Zir warlord. "You will now hear silence." Confusion flickered across alien faces. Silence? What could silence mean? Marcus lifted a small device from his pocket. With a single press, he sent a signal across the void, and the stars themselves changed. Beyond the council's knowledge, humanity had been busy. They had learned quietly in the shadows of arrogant empires. Every insult, every dismissal, every whisper of weakness had been recorded, measured, and turned into steel. While other empires displayed their fleets in parades, humanity built. Theirs in secret, hidden in asteroid belts, buried beneath moons, cloaked in silence. Now those fleets awoke. From the black void around Earth, warships emerged. Not hundreds, but thousands. Ships of blackened steel, hulls absorbing starlight, their shapes unfamiliar, their designs perfected in hidden labs. They did not broadcast signals. They did not boast their presence. They simply moved. The Zir armada, vast and gleaming, surged forward with arrogant confidence. Their cannons lit the void with fire. Then came the human reply. It was not thunder. It was not flame. It was silence. Weapons fired that left no trace, no roar, no warning. Zir ships simply collapsed, hulls folding, inward, as though erased from existence. Command ships went dark, their signals severed. Entire formations vanished, cut apart with surgical precision. The Zir fleet, once proud and mighty, fell into a graveyard stillness. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates screamed, demanded explanations, demanded to know how humanity, a race they mocked as primitive, possessed such weapons. Marcus Hale did not shout back. He merely sat again, his silence louder than their uproar. Hours turned into days, and the news spread like wildfire. The Zir Dominion's fleets had been shattered, their warlord captured in the void, his warships silenced forever. Humanity had not begged. Humanity had not pleaded. They had answered mockery with annihilation. The galaxy trembled. At the next council meeting, no one mocked Marcus Hale. No one whispered insults. No one laughed. The chamber, once filled with noise and arrogance, now echoed with uneasy silence. Marcus did not gloat. He did not smile. He only delivered words as sharp as blades, soft as falling ash. "You saw our silence as weakness," he said, "but silence is where storms gather. You will remember this when you speak to humanity again." And the council understood. For years they had ignored the quiet human. Now their fleets had shattered to silence, and silence was all they would ever hear when they thought of Earth. The Galactic Council chamber glittered with light and sound. Delegates from across the stars argued over borders, resources, and influence. Voices clashed like steel, threats were spoken like promises, and entire wars were declared with nothing more than a flick of the tongue, and in the middle of it all sat Dr. Alara Voss. She was not a soldier nor a warlord. She was a scholar from Earth, slender, dark-haired, eyes sharp with quiet intelligence. She rarely spoke. Where others thundered, she observed. Where others postured, she scribbled notes in her data pad. The aliens mocked her endlessly. The human does not speak, sneered a delegate from the Karthek Dominion, his mandibles clacking in disdain. Perhaps Earth sends scholars because it has no warriors. Or perhaps it has no strength at all. The laughter that followed was cruel, ringing through the chamber like a chorus of hyenas. But Alara only bowed her head slightly, as if conceding the insult, and continued writing. They mistook her silence for weakness. They mistook her patience for surrender. What they forgot was where humanity came from. Earth was a death world. Silence there was never submission. It was survival. The predators of her world did not roar before they struck. They waited. They measured. They ended lives in silence. Alara Voss understood that better than anyone. When the Karthek Dominion launched its fleets, the galaxy barely reacted. The insectoid empire had been expanding for centuries. Earth, with its young colonies and fragile stations, seemed a laughably easy target. The Dominion's warlord, Krytok, sent transmissions across the stars. Earth will kneel or Earth will burn. On Mars, orbital defenses were torn apart in minutes. Colonies on Titan screamed for help until their signals went dark. Earth itself braced for fire. In the council chamber, alien delegates shrugged. To them, this was inevitable. Humanity had never flexed its strength. Why should anyone lift a claw to protect them? It was then that Alara finally rose from her seat. Her voice was calm, precise, like a scalpel cutting through arrogance. "You mistake silence for surrender," she said. Her eyes, cold and unblinking, locked onto Krytak's envoy across the chamber. "You will not mistake it twice." The room went quiet. Even the loudest delegates leaned forward, sensing something shift. Alara pressed her palm to her datapad. A signal pulsed across the void, and the galaxy changed forever. From the Kuiper Belt to the Oort Cloud, hidden human fleets stirred awake. For decades, humanity had watched, studied, and prepared. They learned the strengths and weaknesses of every empire, every war doctrine, every weapon system, and in the silence of cold space, they built their answer. Not fleets of grandeur meant for parades, not weapons designed for intimidation. Humanity had forged something leaner, darker, more precise. The black arcs rose from the void, ships cloaked in adaptive armor, vanishing into starlight. Rail cannons spanning their spines, capable of firing slugs at fractions of light speed. Swarms of drones, silent as shadows, slipping past defenses before shredding command ships to nothing. They had waited. Now they struck. The Dominion fleet never heard the attack. There was no blaring alarm, no roar of cannons, no firestorm across the skies. Ships simply died. One moment, a battlecruiser carried the Dominion's banners proudly. The next, it was torn in half by a slug that arrived faster than its sensors could register. Carriers exploded without a sound, their hangars collapsing before fighters could launch. Command relays went dark, their signals severed in eerie quiet. In the silence of space, the Karthek Armada became a graveyard. Within hours, the fleet that was meant to burn Earth was nothing but drifting wreckage. The council chamber erupted in panic. Delegates shouted, demanded explanations, demanded to know how humanity, primitive, fragile humanity, possessed such weapons. Elara Voss stood calmly at the center, letting the storm of their voices wash over her. "You laughed at our silence," she said when they paused. "You mistook study for weakness. But silence is the first lesson of the death world." Her gaze swept the chamber. On Earth, silence is not surrender. It is how predators hunt. The delegates could find no reply. Their voices, once so full of mockery, were gone. When news of the Dominion's destruction spread, the galaxy trembled. Warlords who had once boasted of power now held their tongues. Empires who had mocked humanity began sending envoys with gifts and apologies. The Karthek Dominion, broken and silent, withdrew to its core worlds, too afraid to risk another war. And in the council chamber, no one laughed at Elara Voss again. She returned to her seat, quiet as ever. Her datapad glowed softly as she resumed her notes. To the untrained eye, it might seem as if nothing had changed. But the galaxy knew better. They had ignored the quiet human, and now their fleets had shattered to silence. The Galactic Council was a place of fire and thunder. Warlords roared of conquest. Diplomats hurled threats disguised as promises. Admirals waved lists of fleets, boasting of their numbers as if war were a contest of who could shout the loudest. And among them, one man sat in silence, Captain Jareth Cole. He was not young anymore. His hair was streaked with gray, his face lined with scars the council had never cared to ask about. He had once been a soldier, fought in battles on Earth no alien empire bothered to notice. Now he was humanity's representative. He did not posture. He did not roar. He simply sat, arms crossed, listening with the weary calm of a man who had seen too much. The council mocked him. "The human captain is mute again," snorted the Draxus warlord, scales glittering under the chamber. Lights. Perhaps his kind knows no language but begging. Laughter followed. Others joined in, speaking of humanity as if it were a curious pet, allowed a seat at the table for amusement. Jareth did not reply. His silence stretched on, patient and cold. They called him a relic, a forgotten soldier from a primitive world. But relics have memories, and soldiers never forget. The Draxus Empire grew hungrier with each passing cycle. Their fleets blackened skies, their armies consumed worlds. When they turned their gaze upon Earth, few were surprised. "Another death world to break," said Warlord Zirak, his voice echoing through the stars. "Another race to kneel." The Draxus Armada fell upon human colonies without hesitation. Stations were obliterated, outposts burned. Millions screamed into the void for help that never came. The council looked away. Why waste effort on fragile humans? In the chamber, Jareth Cole stood. He had never risen before, never spoken. Now every eye turned toward him. His voice was low, steady, not a roar, not a plea, just iron wrapped in quiet. "You mistake silence for weakness," he said. "You mistake peace for fear. You mistake patience for surrender." He paused, letting the words sink in. "You will not mistake it again." Then he raised his hand and pressed a small signal transmitter on his wrist. Far across the void, something stirred. For decades, humanity had been quiet, too quiet. While alien fleets paraded across the stars, humans worked in silence. While empires measured strength in numbers, humans perfected precision. Jareth knew. He had helped build it. He had bled for it. Now, humanity's forgotten fleets awakened. They were not ships meant to impress. Their hulls were plain, black as the void. They bore no banners, no golden trim, no roaring engines. They were built to fight, not to boast. Weapons that whispered instead of thundered. Cannons that fired slugs, faster than lights whisper. Electronic warfare that turned enemy signals into ghosts. Silent warships for a silent people. And now they moved. The Draxus Armada met them with arrogance. Thousands of ships advanced. Weapons glowing, their warlord broadcasting threats across every channel. Then, the silence came. Human ships struck first. Drones slipped between Draxus formations, disabling shields with surgical strikes. Rail slugs ripped through battleships, tearing them apart before their alarms even triggered. Carriers lost entire wings before they could launch. Command ships went dark, their signals swallowed by human jammers. There was no thunder, no spectacle, only ships dying quietly, one after another, until the Draxus formation collapsed in confusion and terror. The void became a graveyard. The Draxus fleet, once a sea of fire, now drifted as silent wreckage. And still, humanity's ships did not roar. They moved in eerie calm, dismantling an empire's pride with surgical precision. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted over one another, demanding to know how humanity had hidden such power. How could a species they mocked as primitive unleash fleets that silenced an empire? Jareth stood at the center, unshaken. His voice cut through the panic, like a blade. "You thought me a relic," he said. "You thought humanity broken, but we remember war. We were forged in it." He leaned forward, eyes like steel. "Peace was our gift to the galaxy. You mistook it for weakness. That mistake ends today." Silence fell. The kind of silence that weighs heavier than words. When news spread that the Draxus fleet had been annihilated, the galaxy trembled. Warlords who once mocked humanity now reconsidered their words. Empires that dismissed Earth sent envoys bearing apologies. The Draxus themselves, their pride shattered, withdrew their surviving forces and licked their wounds in silence. And in the council chamber, no one laughed at Captain Jareth Cole again. He returned to his seat, quiet as ever. For silence had always been his weapon, the patience of a soldier. The stillness before the strike. They had ignored him, mocked him, called him a relic. But now their fleets had shattered to silence, and the quiet man from Earth remained, watching, waiting, reminding them with every breath that silence is not weakness. It is the shadow where strength is born.